Generally, if you keep winning series against your own division, you are eventually going to win that division. And that is what the O's have continued to do this season. It was another series win against the AL East over the weekend, taking 2 out of 3 from the Tampa Bay Rays. And I'll recap it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, June 3rd, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' weekend series win over the Rays, taking 2 of 3 from Tampa Bay here at Oriole Park, winning on Friday with just a big 6th inning and a big hit from Jorge Mateo, winning on Saturday with the bats exploding early, and unfortunately falling Sunday despite another great start from Cole Irvin. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from all 3 of those games. And that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by supplyhouse.com, which is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at supplyhouse.com. So the O's take 2 out of 3 from the Rays this weekend, winning at 3-1 on Friday, winning at 9-5 on Saturday, and then dropping the finale 4-3 on Sunday. But a series win is a series win, and the Orioles through 57 games are 37-20 on the year. They will either be 2 or 3 games back of the Yankees, who also continue to win, depending on the results of their final game of their series in San Francisco against the Giants on Sunday. I'm recording as that game is happening out on the West Coast. But we're going to recap the entire weekend as the Orioles played their first games of June this weekend. And let's start with the Friday night victory for the O's, opening up this series against the Rays with a 3-1 win. I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that one. And the first thing you need to know from Friday's win was Albert Suarez just simply did his job again. Now, he wasn't super dominant. He didn't pitch crazy deep into the game. He didn't look as good as he looked in his first 2 starts in an Oriole uniform. But he is right now filling in for an injured starting pitching staff, and he did that job just fine on Friday. 5 innings of 1-run ball from the veteran right-hander on Friday night. He allowed just 4 hits, struck out 5, and walked 2. Took him 95 pitches to get through 5 innings. He did labor in those first 2 innings. That's why he came out after 5. 7, 8 hard hit balls. The Rays got to him a little bit, but he's got a 1.57 ERA now in an Oriole uniform. It just continues to be baffling what he is able to do. It was his second start back in the Orioles rotation since he replaced Dean Kramer, who went on the injured list last weekend with a bit of a triceps issue. We did get an update from Mike Elias on Kramer when he talked to the media on Friday and said they expect Kramer back. I think the quote was before the end of June. So we're sitting here right now on June 3rd. Kramer's 15-day IL stint would be up actually this Wednesday. So he's clearly not coming back this Wednesday. It's going to take a little more than the 15 days. But it seems like maybe it'll take about a month in general. So, get a couple weeks from now and maybe Kramer's back. That will mean they're going to need a little bit more out of Albert Suarez than they initially thought. But if he's going to pitch like this and he's going to be your 5 starter and give you 5 innings of 1-run ball, I think you're going to take that. And he gave it to him again Friday. And I felt like this might have been the highest pressure start that Suarez has had in an Oriole uniform so far. It wasn't because it was some crazy huge game. It wasn't because it was going for a series or trying to get the O's into first place or we're in September or anything like that. It was because of what news came down on Friday. We will get into this in much greater detail later this week on the show, but we learned on Friday that both Tyler Wells and John Means will be undergoing elbow surgery this month and are both out for the season. Means and Wells are both done for the year for the Orioles. And while it doesn't change anything right now, because both guys were already on the injured list, the Orioles were pitching in the rotation without them, and the O's hope to get Kramer back soon, which means they'll get a little healthier. Long term, it does kind of change their plans on, do they need to trade for a starter? Who do they need to trust? More innings for Albert Suarez. And this was kind of the first test of, this was kind of Suarez's first start of the year where we were like, Albert Suarez could be in a situation where he ends the year in the Orioles rotation. I'm not saying it's likely, but this is the first time he pitched where I thought this is a real possibility right now. And he looked good again. Again, he labored through his first couple of innings, but kind of settled in. The fastball and the cutter command were a little off at times, but the fastball was up to 98. He mixed all four of his pitches really well, which is what you like to see when you're not just dominating with strikeouts. You kind of throw everything their way. 10 whiffs. It wasn't like you got a whole lot of swing and miss, but he's basically kind of been the perfect depth pitcher to have. And again, the hope is 2 weeks from now, Kramer's healthy, rejoins the rotation. Suarez goes back to the bullpen. But it is going to be great to have Albert Suarez kind of be the long reliever / number 6 starter. And whenever you need a spot start or anybody else gets hurt, which is probably going to happen again, considering how it's gone so far this year for the O's, Suarez can certainly step into that role. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles win on Friday is that the O's bullpen was superb behind him. And that was kind of a trend for this weekend, specifically in the first 2 games. The Orioles bullpen has, gotten a lot of harsh words against it this year, but they were really, really good in holding the lead on Friday night. Cionel Perez, Yennier Cano, Danny Coulombe, Jacob Webb, and Craig Kimbrell combined for 4 scoreless innings behind Suarez to close this game out. Perez with a really good looking, really quick 1-2-3-6 to keep it at a 1-0 game. Then the Orioles got 3 runs in the 6th to go up 3-1, which we'll talk about. Yennier Cano was really the only guy of the 5 who struggled at all on Friday night. He did allow a hit. He walked 2, but because of how he split up those walks and the hits and the other things that happened to the runners on base, he was able to wiggle out without an earned run. Danny Coulombe came in, stranded some runners, gave him a scoreless inning. Jacob Webb stranded some runners. And then Craig Kimbrell, 1-2-3 ninth inning with 2 strikeouts in a 3-1 game to get another save and make it now 7 consecutive scoreless outings for Kimbrell. And the Orioles bullpen really did a great job of locking things down on Friday. Third thing you need to know from that 3-1 win over the Rays is that Austin Hayes, while he is definitely no longer an everyday left fielder or any kind of everyday player for the Orioles, he can still be a weapon off the Orioles bench. I mean, at the very least, he is, like we talked about when he came back from the injured list, at the very least is a better version of Ryan McKenna in that role on the team. Like at his lowest, he's a better version of McKenna being your 5th outfielder. But I still think Austin Hayes has more to give than just a better Ryan McKenna. And he's been pretty good against left-handed pitching this year. It's something I talked about on the podcast last week, where we might be seeing Mullins and Hayes kind of falling into a platoon in the outfield at this point. And some of the reason why is A, Mullins has been dreadful against lefties, and B, while Austin Hayes is 3 for, I don't even want to read how bad that is. He is 3 for not a lot, 3 for 45 against right-handed pitching this year. Like, wow. He's also hitting .333 against lefties. So look at how bad Hayes' numbers have been overall, but like he's hitting left-handers. Now it's only 31 plate appearances against lefties on the year, but he is getting it done, and he got it done again on Friday. Came up against the left-hander Richard Lovelady, runners on 1st and 3rd and 1 out. Orioles trailing 1-0 in the bottom of the 6th inning. Hyde takes Mullins out of the game and pinch hits with Austin Hayes, and Hayes delivers an RBI single to tie the game at 1. Not only is Hayes hitting well against lefties, he is now 5 for 9 with 2 doubles and 3 RBIs as a pinch hitter this season. That is a weapon to have against lefties off the bench, even if he does not start the game. Fourth thing you need to know from Friday's win is that I guess Jorge Mateo is just kind of an offensive weapon for the Orioles right now. Now, the O's could be missing some time without Mateo, and we will get to that coming up in a little bit here on this podcast because of what happened in Sunday's game. But he had the big swing in Friday's game, a 2-out, 2-run double off the bat of Mateo in that 6th inning against the righty Phil Maton, put the Orioles up 3-1 and gave them the lead that they would not relinquish. Just crushed the ball at the left center field, 106 off the bat, hit it 389 feet, kind of right off the corner in Elrod's corner by the big wall in left field and the bullpen. He hits that ball just a touch higher. That would have been a 3-run homer. Instead, he settles for a 2-run double to give the Orioles the lead. And listen, it was against a right-hander. The Rays had taken Lovelady out. They had brought in Phil Maton, a righty with a really good breaking ball. And Mateo's still been way, way better against lefties this year. 876 OPS against lefties, 618 OPS against righties. You still don't love seeing him out there against righties a lot. But he's producing enough in general at the plate that he's playable. His defense at second base has been amazing. We know the speed factor is there. And listen, he's also been pretty clutch. You can argue about how much you think Clutch is an actual stat that you can measure and is an actual thing in the game, but Jorge Mateo now is hitting 318 with a 970 OPS with runners in scoring position this season. And as your number 9 hitter, that plays. That certainly plays. And we'll kind of get to the fact that I really hope it is, if it is an absence, a short time absence for Jorge Mateo. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 3-1 win over the Rays to open up this series on Friday night is that Gunnar Henderson finished the month of May on Friday with just an absurd amount of walks. He went 1 for 3 with a single, 2 walks, and a strikeout in the win on Friday. And his May stats were a little bit down from what he did in April. April, he had a 934 OPS. May, he had an 888 OPS. And it was mostly because of the batting average. Henderson only hit 221 in the month of May, but he still hit for a crazy amount of power. He's still got now 19 homers, second in the big leagues right now. And he upped his on-base percentage to 362 because Henderson in May, 21 walks to 25 strikeouts. Something Orioles fans have been calling for, the team not walking enough. Henderson, who walked only 5 times in April, but was a better hitter, walked 21 times in May. And now you want him to put it all together, hit for average, hit for power, and get on base. That's an MVP level player that we think Henderson can be. But he showed a lot of that in the month of May. And now the stats at this point are still saying, hey, he's still a better hitter when he's more aggressive and is walking less. But one thing that's fun to watch is Gunnar Henderson after a walk. He walked 2 times Friday. He walked 2 times on Sunday, just absolutely launching, or as Colton Cowser would say, yeeting the bat towards the Oriole dugout after every single walk. He legitimately looks pissed after he walks. I think he wants to hit the ball, and he gets mad when an opposing pitcher does not give him the chance to hit the ball. But his batter's eye is so good that he won't swing at a lot of balls, and he will take his walks. It's just fun to see the aggressiveness after a walk when Gunnar Henderson does reach first base. But the Orioles pitched it well. They hit it well, timely. They played good defense, and they won the game 3-1 on Friday to open up the series. And then the calendar flipped to June on Saturday. It was a bobblehead day at the ballpark. Huge crowd, and the Orioles were going for a series win. We'll tell you how they got it with a wild beginning to that game on Saturday. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Supply House. Now, listen, you can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. That is supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. You can shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. And do you need help with an order? Well, you can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every single time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. So the Orioles opened up the series against the Rays with a win on Friday and then turned around and got a win again on Saturday to clinch the series, winning it 9-5 in Game 2 in front of a packed house at Camden Yards on Saturday. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that Orioles 9-5 win over the Rays. And the first thing you need to know is Ryan Mountcastle had a huge day for the O's on Saturday. Mountcastle going 2 for 3 with 2 homers, a walk, 3 runs scored, and 4 RBIs on the day with 3 hard hit balls. He mashed a couple of homers in this game that was honestly pretty impressive to see. Both of them coming off the Rays starter, Taj Bradley, who had a bad time in this game. We'll get to it, who allowed 9 runs over 3 1/3 innings in this start. And a lot of that damage done by Ryan Mountcastle. Started it off in the first inning with a 2-run homer that just snuck over the wall in right center field, 105 off the bat, 400 feet for a 2-run shot to put the Orioles up 2-0. And then he hit another one in the fourth inning, 107 off the bat. This one absolutely walloped 431 feet for what was another two-run homer in that fourth inning for the O's. That was when the Orioles kind of jumped back on top in this game in a wild early game in the fourth inning. But Mountcastle, it's been a little while. You know, the power's still been there, but not hitting as many homers. And some of it is because of the wall in left field, but he hasn't hit as many home runs lately. This was his first multi-homer game in almost 13 months. The last time he had 2 homers in a game was May 2nd, 2023 against the Royals, over a year ago. It's been a while for Mountcastle. Now, it's nice for him that next up for the Orioles, they play the Blue Jays this week. And if you are pitching for the Blue Jays, you're not feeling great right now because you know how much Mountcastle loves to hit, especially in Toronto where the Orioles go this week. And he's now also red hot coming into that series. These stats do not include Sunday, where Mountcastle had 1 hit in that game. But after Saturday, in his previous 10 games, Mountcastle was 17 for 37 at the plate. That is a .459 batting average with 5 doubles, 2 homers, 6 RBIs, and a 60% hard hit rate. And I think the craziest part of that stat for Ryan Mountcastle is that after play ended on Saturday, 12 of his previous 14 balls that he had put in play were hard hit, which means exit velocities of 95 miles an hour or more. And generally, a hard hit ball ends up with a hit. It didn't happen every time, but he has been crushing the baseball, and a perfect time to be doing it as he heads to Toronto this week. Second thing you need to know from the O's win over the Rays on Saturday is that Jordan Westburg returned to the Orioles lineup and just kept on hitting. It was like he never missed a beat. Westburg, who was hit by a pitch in the wrist in Tuesday night's game in that loss for the Orioles against the Red Sox, he did not leave the game, but there was some soreness, there was some swelling. Luckily, the x-rays were negative on his wrist, and Brandon Hyde sat Westburg on Wednesday. They had the off day Thursday. He was hoping he'd be ready for Friday. The word was that Westburg was available off the bench Friday. The Orioles didn't use him, but he did not start, but was a full go to return to the Oriole lineup on Saturday. And oh yeah, he was a full go. Playing third base and batting 7th. Westburg going 2 for 4 with a homer, 2 RBIs, and 2 runs scored with a couple of hard hit balls in the game on Saturday. Had a solo home run in the second in his first AB back from getting hit in the wrist. Like, yeah, you could tell his wrist was fine. 107 off bat, 414 feet to dead center, a solo shot that gave the Orioles a 4-3 lead at that point in the second inning. And for Jordan Westburg, it's just incredibly fun to watch this guy hit. He had a 1 for 5 on Sunday, which now gives him a 7-game hitting streak. He is 11 for 27 in that streak at this moment with a couple of doubles, a couple of homers, 7 RBIs, hard hit rate well over 50%. Just the consummate professional, great at bats, gets on base, plays good defense. You felt the absence. He was only out for 2 games, and you feel the absence. That is how important Jordan Westburg has been to this team. Third thing you need to know from the Orioles win on Saturday is that Anthony Santander had a nice day going deep on his bobblehead day. One of the big reasons why there was such a huge crowd at Oriole Park on Saturday is it was the Anthony Santander walk-off home run bobblehead from his walk-off homer in the 9th against the Yankees last year. And yeah, a lot of people got the bobblehead, and a lot of people got to see Santander homer in that game as well. After Mountcastle's 2-run shot in the first, Santander followed up with a solo home run of his own onto Utah Street, hit it 102 off the bat, 401 feet. It was the Orioles' first Utah Street home run of the year. And for Santander, the 10th Utah Street homer of his career. And think about this, right? Oriole Park opened in 1992. Since then, there have been Utah Street homers. Anthony Santander, this puts in perspective how long he's been with the Orioles and how good he's been. With his 10th Utah Street homer on Saturday, Santander is now second all-time in number of homers hit onto Utah Street. Only Chris Davis has more Utah Street homers than Santander. It's been a pretty big part of this Orioles, not just team, but like franchise at this point. Cool moment for Santander, who we know has kind of struggled through the first 2 months of this season. Been nicked up a couple different times, had the knee issue, other things going on, but the bat has not been there. He is starting to take much better at bats. He had a 2 for 4 on Friday with 3 hard hit balls. He hits the home run on Saturday, had a 2-hit game in that one as well. For Santander, it was the first time this season he had multi-hit games in back-to-back games, that happening Friday and Saturday. And then on Sunday, like, he only had the 1 for 5, but it was a couple of hard hit balls, had an RBI single on Saturday on Sunday, to put the Orioles up 3-0. Like, he continues to swing the bat better and better over this last week. And Santander was also just part of the early onslaught that the Orioles put on Taj Bradley. I mentioned it, 9 runs on 9 hits over 3 1/3 innings with those 4 homers that the Orioles hit against Bradley. They just could not be stopped. 3 in the first, 1 in the second, 3 in the third, and 2 in the fourth off the Rays' young righty. It was just fun to watch them hit on Saturday. Honestly, it was pretty fun to watch them hit all weekend and all week. The Orioles have won 8 of 10 since being swept by the Cardinals, and they were on Bradley again. They've been on him before, and they were on him again on Saturday. But on the flip side of the pitching end, the fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles' win in Game 2 of this series is that Kyle Bradish was not very good, and he basically had zero command in this game. And it was tough to watch because this is one start removed from when he threw 7 no-hit innings in Chicago against the White Sox last Sunday, and his start to follow it up was by far his worst of the season. Now, he missed some time, so he hasn't been out there the entire year, but for Bradish, 2 2/3 innings, 5 runs allowed on 7 hits with 6 strikeouts and 3 walks for Kyle Bradish. And on the one hand, it's disappointing because you're like, he couldn't even finish 3 innings. The Orioles have all these games without an off day. You can't be, asking the bullpen to do that much. And on the other side, you're like, it was pretty easily identifiable what happened to Bradish. Like, he got 8 outs and 6 of them were via the strikeout. So the breaking stuff was still looking good. That's a positive to take out of this. The negative is he had no sinker command. That sinker is his number one fastball. Generally, he might throw a few more sliders than sinkers, but he throws a lot of them. He just had no command of it. And when you have no command of your main called strike pitch, it is really hard to get major league hitters out, especially the Rays, who have struggled this year, but that's still a solid big league offense. It was his shortest start since he allowed 7 runs over 2 1/3 against the Red Sox back on April 25th of 2023. That's not counting the final day of last season when the Orioles had nothing to play for. He started and threw just 2 innings just to get some work. But he just couldn't escape that 3rd inning when the Rays jumped right back on him in the 3rd, got 2 runs in that 3rd inning and got Bradish out of the game. But really, it was kind of unlucky. That 3rd inning, Bradish started it with a strikeout, but the breaking ball in the dirt hit the front of the plate and then shot up in the air kind of off of Adley's glove and went over the netting and out of play, which allowed the leadoff runner in that inning to, despite striking out, reach first base. And then the Rays scored both of those runs with 2 outs. So theoretically, if that ball doesn't hit the front of the plate, Bradish puts up a 0, is out of the 3rd. How much longer does he pitch? I don't know. The pitch count was really high. I mean, maybe if he barrels it in, could get through 5 innings at that point. It's not like he was pitching well, but that was a really tough break. And then you could tell by the end, I mean, he walked the final batter he faced to load the bases, just had no command of that sinker whatsoever. That final batter, 5 sinkers. It was a 3-1 count and walked him on another sinker, just kind of had nothing. Hopefully Bradish can just flush that one. Like, he only had 3 whiffs. Just not his best day. The sinker was only in the strike zone 41% of the time. That is not good. You need that up around 60% if you're going to be good. The breaking balls were still solid. Like, he had command of the slider and the curveball, but when you don't have fastball command, it is really tough to get big league hitters out. And again, he just did not on Saturday. But the bullpen picked him up. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 9-5 win over the Rays on Saturday to clinch a series victory is that this may have been the best full-out performance by the Orioles bullpen in 2024, because they picked up Kyle Bradish in a huge way. Now, the bullpen was, I wouldn't say rested, because they used 5 relievers on Friday. Now, nobody of those 5 relievers threw many pitches at all. Like, 19 pitches by Danny Coulomb Friday night was the most any of the 5 relievers had thrown. So everybody who threw Friday was available Saturday, because the Orioles also had the off day on Thursday. But when you look ahead, I was already starting to panic after Kyle Bradish left in the 3rd inning, because I'm like, the Orioles are in Game 2 of a 17-game stretch without an off day, and a large chunk of those games are against the AL East. These are huge games without off days. Their bullpen's going to be in a bad place. I was thinking, man, Thiago Vieira is going to have to pitch. The Orioles are going to have to make a move and get a fresh arm up on Sunday. And then Jacob Webb came in and changed the entire complexion of that game, and maybe even this entire week for the Orioles. Webb comes in, gets a fly out on 2 pitches with the bases loaded and 2 outs in the 3rd to keep it at a 5-4 deficit. And then the Orioles get 2 in the 4th to go back up. They get 3 in the third and then 2 more in the fourth to extend the lead. And Webb just locks in. 2 and a third scoreless, 1 strikeout, 1 walk, and he did it on only 23 pitches, which means although he wasn't available Sunday, he's ready to pitch again here on Monday night if the Orioles need him. It was a gigantic 7 outs, and the O's continued after that. Dylan Tate got himself a 1-2-3 sixth inning, came back out for the 7th, did allow a couple of bloop singles, came out of the game. Cionel Perez came in. Slider was dominant, got out of the jam in the 7th to keep the Orioles up 9-5. By the way, Dylan Tate's velocity, he was averaging 94.8 up to 93.6. That's the Dylan Tate velo we know from 2022. That was a fantastic sign to see. After Perez comes out, Cano, who again struggled Friday, 1-2-3 inning with 2 strikeouts. You love to see that. And then the Orioles were able to rest Craig Kimbrell as Keegan Aiken, although he did give up a hit in the 9th, got 2 strikeouts and put up a 0 after Aiken had been horrendous in his previous 2 outings, gives the O's a huge bounce back scoreless inning. The bullpen was phenomenal. 6 1/3 innings from the Oriole bullpen, 3 hits, no runs, 7 Ks, and 1 walk on Saturday. They were fantastic. They were honestly the reason. Remember, they had the 4 scoreless innings on Friday as well. The Orioles bullpen is the reason why they won this series. And I know we'll get to it. Tate had a little bit of a rough day on Sunday, but you got to applaud the Orioles bullpen for what they did against the Rays this weekend, leading to that series win. But the O's had a chance to sweep the series on Sunday, and they led for most of Sunday's game. But unfortunately, the offense couldn't come up with the big hit, and the bullpen did show a little bit of a crack in that game as they did lose the finale. We'll talk about that loss and break it down to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks, which is just the most fun, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in just a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. All you need to do is pick more or less on 2 or 3 players' stats. They've got projections on Prize Picks. It might say, Gunnar Henderson, 2.5 total bases, more or less. You say more, that's your pick. That's it. It literally takes less than 60 seconds. It's amazing. You can win 100 times your money with baseball-only lineups on Prize Picks. If you submit a winning lineup featuring 4 demon squares as well, you'll cash in big time on the biggest moments of baseball's early season. So what you need to do, you just need to get over to the App Store and download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today, use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So the Orioles won the series, clinched the series with the win on Saturday, and had a chance to sweep it on Sunday. They were oh so close to getting the sweep, but unfortunately the Rays came back and the Rays beat the O's 4-3 in the series finale on Sunday. Still a big series win for the Orioles, but could not get the sweep. And I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from the series finale loss on. And the first thing you need to know is from that Sunday loss is that Cole Irvin was he was great again. I mean, he did it again. He didn't miss a lot of bats. He struck out 1 batter. He walked 1 batter, but it was kind of like the frustrating version, at least frustrating for other teams, Cole Irvin, that you love to see. 6 1/3 innings from Irvin on Sunday, 2 runs, 8 hits, 1 K, 1 walk, 1 homer, 90 pitches for Irvin. Listen, the Rays were kind of all over him. They had like 13 hard hit balls against him in 6 1/3 innings. Like, that's not what you want to see. But the balls were hit right at people. You love to see that from Irvin. He cruised through. He wasn't walking guys. He wasn't striking guys out. So he was getting outs very early in counts that allowed him to pitch deeper into the game. Got into a little bit of trouble at one point in the 5th, got into a little bit of trouble in the 7th, and came out of the game after giving up a home run to Jose Caballero. But otherwise, he was good. He was just good. Again, he's got a 2.84 ERA on the season. And kind of when the O's needed it most, I'd mentioned the Orioles bullpen, now in game 3 of 17 straight without an off day, had thrown 10 1/3 innings in the last 2 games. That's a tough spot. You need length from your starter, and they got it with 6 1/3 innings. And it was kind of an interesting mix for Cole Irvin. He threw 40 of his 90 pitches were 4-seamers. That is by far the most four-seam fastballs he's thrown in any start for the Orioles this season. So it was kind of a different mix. And that's what's so cool about Cole Irvin. Like, he's not going to strike an incredible amount of guys out, but he has 6 different pitches. And not only does he mix them all in within starts, but he mixes them start to start. So he'll have a stretch where he throws a lot of curveballs, then boom, a lot of sinkers, then boom, a lot of cutters. This one, a lot of four-seamers. As an opposing offense, you just kind of never know what you're going to get. And for Irvin, there wasn't even any breaks in this lineup. The Rays had 9 right-handed hitters in there in the starting lineup against Irvin. Didn't matter, just kind of cruised through them. Once again, he has been kind of irreplaceable for this Orioles rotation this season. Second thing you need to know from the Sunday loss is, unfortunately, the Orioles just didn't have a lot of bullpen left after what happened Friday and Saturday, and when you're looking forward in the schedule as well. And it did come back to bite them with the loss. Now, Dylan Tate relieved Cole Irvin in the 7th inning with 1 out and nobody on after the home run and a fly out. He did allow a 2-out single, but Tate got his 2 outs in the inning, kept the Orioles at the time up 3-2. And then Tate came back out there for the 8th, which I kind of agreed with. He had only thrown like 10, 11, 12 pitches. Tate had only thrown 14 pitches the night before. He hadn't pitched before that since Wednesday, so he was rested enough to get some righties out. And again, the Rays had a bunch of righties. Really, the only other guy the Orioles were going to go to out of the bullpen is Danny Coulombe. And while Coulombe gets a lot of righties out, he's still better against lefties, and you'd like to save him if you can. The only thing I had a little bit of an issue with is that Tate did give up back-to-back singles. They weren't very hard hit at all to start the 8th inning. I just probably would have gone to the pen after that, but I understand why Brandon Hyde did not. I probably just would have gone to Danny Coulombe. He was ready at that point in the 8th inning. You're still holding the lead. Danny Coulombe has stranded all 12 runners he's inherited this year. So if anybody's going to strand inherited runners and keep you in the lead, it's going to be Danny Coulombe. I get that he would have had to face righties, but it was the 7, 8, and 9 righties at the bottom of the Rays order, which I think he could handle. I think the issue was Hyde was kind of just waiting for the Rays and Kevin Cash to pinch hit with a lefty. The Rays had a bunch of good lefties on the bench because they started all righties on Sunday. And he was just waiting for that pinch hitter because Tate is much worse against lefties. And then he was just going to pull the string on Coulombe. But Cash just decided I'd rather face Tate and kept the righties in there. And I think the turning point was what happened with Jose Siri. So it's 1st and 2nd, no outs. Orioles leading 3-2 in the top of the 8th inning. And Dylan Tate is out there, who fields his position well. And the Orioles are expecting Jose Siri to bunt. He hasn't hit the ball well at all this year. He's a strikeout machine. He's got good speed and he can bunt. I think both sides were like, Jose Siri is going to bunt here. And I think the plan was, okay, Dylan Tate, he's a pretty good strike thrower. He makes the play. He gets the out on the bunt. At worst, it's 2nd and 3rd with 1 out. And then we go to Danny Coulombe to try and escape the jam. I think that's what the plan was. The issue was for Dylan Tate, Jose Siri was trying to give the Orioles an out, and Dylan Tate refused to take it. That was the big issue. First 2 pitches were sliders down and away for balls. Then Siri missed on a bunt, or I think he missed on a bunt to make it 2-1. And then Tate missed again with a pitch to go 3-1, and Siri wasn't even bunting. So then everything changed, and then Tate had to throw a strike because you don't want to walk the bases loaded, and he kind of grooved a fastball in there. Siri, who cannot hit breaking balls, but Tate was struggling with the breaking ball command, and Siri rips that fastball into right center field for a 2-run double to give the Rays that 4-3 lead. And it was just a tough spot because, again, if Tate just grooves a sinker on the first pitch right down the middle, Siri bunts it, they throw him at first, they get 2nd and 3rd. I think Hyde goes to Coulombe to try and get out of the jam. And we have no idea if Coulombe gets out of that jam or not, right? That's a tough spot. At worst, maybe, he gives up 1 run, it's 3-3, you're in a better spot. But it was a really tough spot. And the other thing you're thinking about when you're making that bullpen decision is, and I know fans don't want to hear this, but again, the Orioles were in game 3 of a 17-game stretch without an off day. You have to think about, okay, who's going to be available and who's not. Once Dylan Tate was in that game with his 2nd consecutive day pitching, no matter how many pitches he throws, he's going to be unavailable on Monday, no matter what. Brandon Hyde is not using his relievers, especially Dylan Tate coming off the injury 3 days in a row. So okay, Tate's arm feels good enough to keep going. I know I'm not going to have him tomorrow anyway. I have to be careful with the bullpen. There's a bunch of righties out. He's really good against the righties. Tate's been amazing since getting recalled from AAA. You totally understand why Hyde made the decision he did. Here's the other thing. I'm kind of like on the fence right here about how I felt about not going to Coulombe at some point. Well, they eventually did, and he kept it at 4-3. And he got 4 outs, which is a good job by Danny Coulombe. But you have to understand, decisions are not graded out by the result. The result of the 2-run double does not mean it was a bad decision by Dylan to keep Dylan Tate in there. You can argue the merits of the decision beforehand, but just because he doubles and the result was bad does not mean the decision was bad, does not mean the process was bad. That is tough, I think, in general, outside of baseball, outside of sports, for people to process, because we are in a results-oriented world, obviously. But I think it could have gone either way. Unfortunately, the decision that Hyde made didn't work out. But the flip side of that is the bullpen literally was the reason the O's won this series to begin with. They're in a tough spot. You cut them a little slack for what happened on Sunday. Third thing you need to know from that Sunday loss, Gunnar Henderson's just awesome. That is my third thing. Gunnar Henderson's awesome. 3 for 3, 2 more walks, reached base all 5 times, had 2 hard hit singles in the 3rd and the 6th. And oh yeah, he hit his 6th leadoff home run of the season. 0-1 slider from Zach Littell launches it onto Utah Street. That's right. The Orioles didn't have a Utah Street homer all year. Then Santander does it Saturday, and Henderson does it Sunday on the very next day. 109 off the bat, 420 feet for Gunnar's 19th homer of the year. He would still be leading Major League Baseball if everybody just wasn't throwing Aaron Judge pitches right down the middle. And Judge has 15 homers in his last 25 games and is now up to 21 on the season to lead baseball. But Henderson right there, keeping pace with him. Just incredible to watch him hit. He's so locked in at the moment. Fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles 4-3 Sunday loss to the Rays is that the Orioles got a lot of hits in this game. Like, it is very rare that you acquire 15 hits in one game and lose. And scoring only 3 runs on 15 hits is actually kind of hard to do. But the issue was, it was just all singles from the Orioles. Of the 15 hits, only 2 extra base hits. It was Henderson's leadoff homer, and then it was the 7th inning hustle double from Austin Hayes. Like, he only doubled because he put the afterburners on and slid into second safely. Those were the only 2 extra base hits. Singles can be good. They can help you out. But as I've talked about a lot this year with the Orioles' philosophy, right? They're looking to do damage. It's much easier to get a lot of runs home on one extra base hit than a bunch of singles. And that's what the O's had. They had 13 singles on Sunday. Even 13 singles generally will result in more than 3 runs. I mean, really, when you think about it, 13 singles resulted in 2 runs because the first run was a homer on the first batter. And then after that, the Orioles had 13 singles and 1 double, and they ended up with 2 runs out of it. You add in the fact that Gunnar Henderson had those 2 walks for more base runners, and just kind of a tough break to get that many hits and just not sequence them correctly to get more runs in. I think the one place the singles hurt them the most was in that 8th inning. That was the Orioles' chance to come back in this game right after they'd given up 2 in the top of the 8th. The O's started to rally in the bottom of the 8th inning. Ramon Arias gets hit by a pitch. James McCann flies out. Then Henderson walks. You've got first and second with 1 out against Garrett Clevenger. Adley Rutschman rips a single into left field, but unfortunately, Ramon Arias, and there was literally no chance to use a pinch runner there. You could not use a pinch runner. There was no other infielders on the bench to play defense. You had to leave Arias in there. And Arias doesn't run well. Adley ripped the ball into left field on 1 hop, and Arozarena has a great arm in left field who picked it up. It was the right decision to hold Arias at third. And that loaded the bases with 1 out for the aforementioned red-hot Ryan Mountcastle, hitting, well over 400 his last 10 games, already had a single in the game, and you have a lefty Clevenger on the mound, and Mountcastle punishes lefties. It was the perfect place for, at the very least, the Orioles to tie the game there. Unfortunately, first pitch, Mountcastle grounds into a 5-4-3 double play. Just an unfortunate break there. He swung at a pitch right at the knees, probably should have taken it, but he was trying to do some damage, and he grounded one right to the third baseman, and it didn't work out for the O's. They set up the perfect spot, but that was where kind of the single hurt them, and then really just leaving the bases loaded there hurt pretty badly. But again, they left runners on base because they couldn't come through with the big damage hit instead of just 13 singles in one game. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 4-3 loss to the Rays on Sunday that finished off this series is that Jorge Mateo left the game in kind of a scary incident early in this one. It was early in the game, 4th inning, I believe. Jorge Mateo's in the hole. Cedric Mullins is in the on-deck circle for the Orioles as they were at the plate, and Austin Hayes was up there hitting, and Jorge Mateo, you could see it on the MASN broadcast. They played a replay. Mateo goes down to the on-deck circle, kind of comes up the stairs, reaches down to the on-deck circle, kind of beside it to grab one of those bat weights to put on his bat to get ready to warm up. And Cedric Mullins is kind of like swinging the bat, loosening up his arms. And on coming down with the bat, he hits Mateo in the back of the head. Now, luckily, Mateo already had his helmet on, which is hopefully is going to end up being huge in this spot for Jorge Mateo and just his health. Already had his helmet on, but immediately grabs his head, goes down, goes back into the dugout, is holding his head as the Orioles training staff is looking at him. And you immediately see Brandon Hyde come out, and Ramon Arias comes out to pinch hit for Jorge Mateo. And you're like, oh no, what happened? And then you see the replay, and just what an unfortunate spot. I mean, Mateo had already had a single in the game. He's been playing so well. He's swinging it better of late, as I talked about, playing great defense, running the base as well. And shout out to Ramon Arias, who with the Westberg hit by pitch, and now Mateo has gotten a little bit more of a chance lately. And hey, he reached base twice. He had a single. He was hit by a pitch to start the rally in the 8th. I thought Ramon Arias was going to have to come out of the game in the 8th inning, got hit by a pitch on the foot, was limping around a lot. The Orioles would have had no infielders. They legitimately had no infielders left on the bench. If they had to take Arias out of that game, either James McCann or Ryan Mountcastle was going to be playing third base defensively in the top of the 9th inning. That would have been something to behold, but luckily Arias was able to stay in the game. But really, you're just worried about Mateo, not just for the Orioles' sake, because he's been so good, but just for his health. I mean, those concussions were tough. It was also tough, the fact that Brian Roberts was in the broadcast booth all weekend, and he was there to talk about it just because, concussions kind of ended his career with the Orioles because he got a couple of them. Now, for Mateo, the hope is that it's something minor. He's okay. He can come back in the lineup, but concussions are not something you want to take lightly. Now, in terms of the roster, if Mateo does have to go on the concussion IL, which is good, there is a concussion IL, which is only 7 days. You can kind of, stay on the IL a little shorter if you have a concussion. But if he does have to go on the IL, you kind of have 3 choices, I would say, in AAA. You've got Jackson Holliday, who you could bring back to play the infield. You've got Connor Norby, and you've got the veteran in Nick Maton, who's been swinging the bat well down there in AAA. If the Orioles feel that Mateo is going to go on the concussion IL, you need to replace him. But, after the 7 days or a little bit more, he'll be back and good to go. I do think this could be Connor Norby's chance. He's been swinging it really well. 886 OPS in AAA Norfolk for Norby, who's just basically been in Norfolk for over 2 years at this point. And I've been talking about, hey, I'm sorry, Norby's the most blocked prospect in the system. It would take an injury to get him up here. This could be the injury that gets Connor Norby to the majors. And you could argue, well, why would you not just bring Jackson Holliday back? He's a second baseman. Mateo's been kind of taking his playing time. This would be the perfect time to bring him back. I don't know that they're going to bring Holliday back as just a short-term fix. Because again, if they think Mateo is only going to be out for a short amount of time on the concussion IL, I'm not sure they're bringing up Holliday for 10 days and then sending him right back down to AAA. I think when they bring Jackson Holliday back, it's going to be bringing him back for good in the major leagues. So what I think they would do is if Mateo misses time, Norby comes up. You have Westberg in the lineup every day at either third or second, obviously Henderson at short, and then Arias and Norby just kind of rotate out playing either third base or second base for that open infield position in the starting lineup, and that could get Norby some at-bats as well. There's also the scenario where, and we'll find out obviously much more, and I haven't even seen the post-game comments from Hyde at this point. We're going to find out much more here moving forward about if Mateo has to miss time, if he does, how much time would he potentially have to miss? Like, we'll kind of get all that stuff here in the coming days. But if Mateo doesn't go on the IL, but it's like, it's bothering him, he has to miss a few days, you still probably have to make a roster move because, you'll see guys who, they're out for like 2 days, just like Westberg was the other day, right? Westberg was out for 2 days. The Orioles went without another infielder, but that's because Westberg was really only out on Wednesday. He was available off the bench Friday. If Mateo's not going to be available off the bench even for multiple days, you can't just ride with no infielders off the bench, because if you want to pinch hit for Arias or you want to, somebody else gets injured, whatever, you can't just roll with no infielders. So even if Mateo stays on the roster but is maybe out for a few days, I think the Orioles could maybe still bring up either Connor Norby or maybe even Nick Maton. And unfortunately, it would probably mean Kyle Stowers gets sent back to AAA, not because of anything bad he's done, but because he's not a full-time starter and he has options, and you could hopefully bring him back up after the 10 days he spends in AAA. It would be a tough spot for the Orioles roster. Here's just hoping that Jorge Mateo ends up being okay for the Orioles and there's not any kind of major head injury. And it was just a scary moment. I mean, you look at it from the Cedric Mullins sense, like he had another bad day at the plate. Like, how much worse can it get for Cedric Mullins? Just a freak accident that he's involved in. Did make a nice catch in center field in this game, but otherwise just struck out in the big spot in the 7th. Like, man, I hope it's not weighing on Mullins either, because he's already probably not in the greatest headspace with how much he's been struggling. Like, after his big strikeout in the 7th, slammed his bat on the ground and broke it in half, and then was pinch hit for by Colton Cowser with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning. Like, not a good spot for Mullins. Hopefully this being involved in this does not make it worse for him, but Orioles could have gotten the sweep, didn't get it. Biggest thing, Hero, hoping though for good health and good news for Jorge Mateo. That'll do it though for today's episode, man. Went kind of long on this one, but there was a lot to talk about with another Orioles AL East series win. And listen, yeah, it's disappointing they didn't get the sweep, but the Orioles win another series against the AL East. In their last 19 series against American League East opponents, the Orioles have won 14 of them and tied 5 of them. They have not lost to an AL East team in a series in their last 19 inter-division series. That's pretty impressive. They look to continue that streak tonight as they go north of the border for the first time this year and will take on the Toronto Blue Jays, a team that came into Baltimore a couple weeks ago. They had one game rained out. Adley Rutschman had the walk-off homer. The team split the 2 games. They will now go to Toronto, who's played a little bit better baseball as of late. They are still 28-30 on the season. They just won a series against the Pirates this weekend, had a crazy 14-inning game on Friday night. But game 1 is tonight. Grayson Rodriguez goes for the Orioles. Our old friend Kevin Gausman goes for the Blue Jays. And I will be back tomorrow recapping game 1 between the O's and the Jays, getting you any further information you need to know about Jorge Mateo's injury. And we'll get into a little bit more of the situation with John Means and Tyler Wells, both of them getting another elbow surgery and are out for the year. What does it mean for the Orioles? What does it mean for their careers? We'll get to that on tomorrow's episode. And also on tomorrow's show, as a celebration for getting over 7,000 subscribers on YouTube, we will announce the giveaway that we're doing. That's coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.